Awesome. Thanks, man.
And you're speaking in English tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay, because he also speaks Polish and Italian and a few other languages, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I will relay what you said to the woman who cuts my hair. So. She's great. Her name's Bernadette. She's wonderful. So, come to Christ, right? That's the topic of this monthly gathering. It's when we get to come to Christ and hear about, oh my gosh, that is such a beautiful baby. Look at that. Well, it reminds me, seeing a baby, sorry, I kind of have that, has anybody here seen Up? The dog who sees a squirrel, that's me. But the baby caught my eye because what's really beautiful is not just how we came to Christ, even though each one of our stories are profoundly beautiful. What's beautiful is we can come to Him because He came to us. And He came to us like that. He came to us in the sneakiest way possible as this cute little baby, and we accept Him in, and then we realize, oh no, this is going to change everything. So that's kind of what it was for me. My story, just like all of our stories, begins before I was born. What was that reading we had at Mass just this last Sunday? Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you. And so I'll start with my parents. My parents were both born and raised in Poland. That's where they met. That's where they had my two older sisters. And then they moved to this country a year before I was born. To celebrate coming to the U.S., they had their first son born on the 4th of July. So I was born into a Polish family. That's an important detail because Polish basically equals Catholic. So Sunday Mass was a non-negotiable. We would pray every night before going to bed. Because I was Polish, I was Catholic, and that was the end of it. And I grew up accepting that. I didn't really fight going to church too often. I didn't really fight praying. In fact, it got to be such a habit for me that even when I was at a friend's house for a sleepover, I'd be tossing and turning in bed and I haven't prayed, I need to pray. And then I'd go to the side of the bed and I'd kneel down. The friend would be like, what are you doing? I'm praying, I have to pray. So my parents, and I thank them so much for this, ingrained that in me. But that was kind of the extent of it. Growing up, I was Catholic because I was Polish, period. I was Catholic as a member of my family. But did I have a real intimate relationship? I can't say I did. I had probably a normal relationship with our Lord. And so in this story, I'm not going to tell you any kind of spectacular face down in the gutter, high on cocaine, hit rock bottom moment that I knew that I needed to turn to Jesus. I didn't have that. But I was in possibly a worse danger. I was in the danger of just living a life of mediocre mid-level faith. Of, I'm Catholic, but just on the peripheries of my life. It's something that, yeah, I do, but it's not actually going to inform my decisions. It's not actually going to give me a purpose for which to live. It's just, you know what? That was what I got in the lottery of life, was that I was born into a Catholic family. So I was living my life in that way, pretty normal way to be growing up. And then I started realizing I was becoming splintered. My identity was shattering. It wasn't formed around one thing. And so I had some friends. This was middle school, so I'm still pretty young. I'm not talking about college friends or anything. But I was in middle school, and I was one Michael with this group of friends, another Michael with this group of friends, another Michael at Sunday school, which I actually didn't mind. It was kind of fun learning. I guess I already had this vocation imprinted on me and I didn't know it. But then I was a different person with family, with friends, at school, at church, at home. And I started realizing I have no idea who I am. Which Michael am I? Which mask should I put on in which scenario? And ooh, God forbid I put the wrong one on at the wrong time. That was the track that I was going down. Did anybody ever see any of those awful movies, American Pie? Good, very few people, thanks be to God. Well, I did in middle school, and I thought, all right, now I know what high school is going to be. I thought, that's my goal. My goal is everything that those movies stood for. And you know what the craziest thing was? I didn't see any discrepancy between that and going to church on Sunday with my parents. I even learned the catechism pretty well in those Sunday school meetings. I didn't mind it, but I didn't see that there was something off. And the key was I didn't know who I was. I didn't know which Michael was the real Michael. And that's where I thank God for my sister. So my older sister, she became my confirmation sponsor. Hey, how are you? She became my confirmation sponsor, but the reason why I chose her was this. She's annoying. I love you, Deanna. She's annoying in that she used to be like, the older sister would check in on me, and she just like, open the door into my room and walk in and say, like, are you doing drugs? You shouldn't be doing drugs. I learned about drugs today. And she helped out with our churches. I grew up going to St. Thomas Aquinas Parish, right? And we had Life Team, which is this very good program for youth ministry. And we happened to have these phenomenal youth ministers there at that time, a great core group. In fact, Carlo was... oh my gosh, so many former adult helpers for Life Team. Well, she invited me to this group, and it met on Sunday evenings after the evening mass. And I thought, all right, I really don't have anything going on Sunday. I'll go, but only to get her off my back. I'll go so that I can prove to myself and to her that all the people there are lame, and that I have better things to do with my time, and that I don't need this. So I go, and man, I was duped. Because I went there and I realized, I actually kind of like these people. There's a certain freedom here. Like, we, teenagers, are willing to be goofy around each other without this thought of like being crippled by insecurity. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And then some of the juniors for the group took me in as a freshman and said, like, hey, let's go to Taco Bell after this. I was like, all right, let's go. We're going to hang out. Friendship. Friendship was what ended up doing me in. Because I saw there a group of people being fully alive. Were they sinners? Absolutely. We were still messing up left and right, but we were at least striving toward the same thing together. So I found that in this place where I thought everybody was going to be lame and I wasn't going to like any of them, I found that there were people there that I liked and who actually cared about getting to know me, like me as I truly am. And two people in particular in this group changed me. One was Emily. Oh, we all have an Emily, right? So she was that like puppy love freshman year. It's just like, oh, this is clearly the girl I'm going to marry. I'm 14, but I already know this. Well, so she had a habit of going to daily mass, right? And I thought, if she's going to be going to mass every day, I know where I can meet her every day. I'm going to daily mass. So I started going to mass, and this remarkable thing happened. Even though I started so that I could be like, oh, look at that pretty girl. That's cool. This is great. My attention shifted over the course of the days and weeks that I was at the mass from this girl next to me to what was happening at the altar. And I thought, if that's real, this changes everything. Because since my first communion, I knew that's Jesus. But I had kind of the same understanding of it that most of us have. Yeah, that's Jesus. Cool. Okay. What? If that's Jesus, that changes everything. This should be the center of my life. If this is the living God that I get to receive, then this should be what I build my life around rather than just something peripheral. Just a small part of my life. No, this has to be the center of my life. So I started really focusing on that Mass, on what was happening there. We were blessed also at St. Thomas to have an Adoration chapel. 24 hours a day, I can go into that chapel and pray. And boy, is that a good thing for a teenage boy to have. So that at 2 in the morning, I could drive myself over there, plop myself down and say, Lord, why did you make teenage girls so crazy? It's true. They're all insane. No offense. We're all dumb, so it's okay. When dumb meets crazy, you get high school. I love you all very much. But I started going to daily Mass as often as I could. So not every day, but pretty frequently. I started going to that Adoration chapel and building up an interior life, learning how to pray. And did it come easy? Some days, yes. Other days I was like, I have no idea what I was doing for the last half an hour, but I don't think that I was praying. And so I started diving into Scripture. And I remember the first book that I really got into, I think it was 1 Corinthians. And I was so zealous. I had my Bible, had a bunch of note cards, and I just jot down little notes that I was thinking about. And I think I still have those in a box someday. But I started getting interested in that. When I had questions, oh my gosh, something incredible happened. I realized that I have this instrument up here that I can use to find answers to the questions. And so I would ask my youth minister for advice. I'd be like, hey, so what should I do in this case? Or for teaching. This part of the faith, what is that all about? And sometimes he'd explain it, or other times he'd be like, well, I don't know how to explain that. Here's a book. And I started really just engaging myself in this faith that up to that point had been peripheral. Up to that point, I had been Catholic just because that's what Polish people do. And I started learning that I'm Catholic because that's what God calls me to. Because He made my mind for truth. He made me have this yearning for truth. And so once I got a taste of it, I wanted all of it. And so I started studying my faith. But He also made me for goodness. And so I started looking at how am I living? This Michael lives pretty well, but how about these other 7 Michaels? And that's where the second person in my story comes in. It's my dear friend Nate. So my high school was in Albuquerque, Cibola. My youth group was in Rio Rancho, St. Thomas Aquinas. So most of my very close friends there they went to Rio Rancho High School. But I had 2 in particular who went to Cibola with me. And Nate and I we kind of clicked. We became very close friends. And he was that figure in my life that I pray all of us have at one time. The bridge figure. The one who takes our shattered selves, splintered into Michael 1, Michael 2, Michael 3, Michael 4, and helps them to unite into the one person that you truly are. Multifaceted, yes. Different people bring out different parts of us, but it's got to be the same person. What he helped me with is that he saw me at church and he saw me at school. He saw me with this group of friends and with that group of friends, and he was able to be that stable presence in my life. To remind me ooh, that didn't sound much like the Michael that I know. What's going on? Oh, I pray all of us can have a friend like that. But what that friendship was just a pale reflection of the deeper friendship that was developing within me. That was my friendship with the Lord. Nourished at the table at the altar of Mass, but also in that Adoration chapel. In those minutes and hours that I would spend there, I was learning that my identity was not based in this group or that group, but in Him, who, before He formed me in the womb, knew me. Who knew and delighted in me. See, that was the part that I couldn't get. I thought, I have to impress this group or that one. How do I show people that I'm worth their time? I have to be impressive. If it's an argument, I have to win it. If it's a basketball game, I have to score the most points. If it is, one of the things, because we all reach for things, like what's my identity, and I'm a great athlete, or I'm a great student, or I really help everybody. There are all these different things that we do, and if we think about it long enough, we do it so that people will like us. Well, one of mine was, all right, I'm not the strongest guy, I'm not the fastest guy, I'm not the smartest guy, But at least me in high school, my thought was, but if that girl's there, I can get her to like me. And that's what I was starting to form my identity around. That, and just people in general. I thought, if there's a group of people there, I bet you they'll like me. Please like me, please. And there was this great insecurity of not having my identity set. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there was this kind of splintered self. Nate, in his friendship, my wider group of friends and their friendship, and then our Lord in his friendship helped solidify me into one person, gave me that identity. And that identity was rooted in the fact that before I could come to Christ, he came to me, as I said at the very beginning. Of course, he came to me in the incarnation, right? When he became a little baby for our sake. We think everything was bad in my life, then I met Jesus, and now everything's great. Come on, that's not the way it works. It's everything was bad in my life, then I met Jesus, now everything's bad in my life, but I have Jesus and I love it. It's not that everything magically becomes easier. No, he ended up calling me to the most difficult thing I would ever do. And also the thing that would bring me deeper joy than anything else I could ever imagine. He ended up calling me to the great adventure of discerning his will, which is an adventure that plays out in all of our lives. Now, some people have these spectacular stories, as I said, where they're face down in the gutter and they hear the voice of God. That wasn't mine, and I'd venture to guess that's not most of us. Most of us have just as adventurous a story, but it's one that plays out in the arena of the heart. In our daily prayers, in our, God, what do you want me to do today? God, this person, I just don't know how to respond to them, and I just never have the right words, and all right, I'm going to try my best. In the day-to-day relationships that we have, in the small decisions that we have, but then also those build up to the big decisions of what course do you want my life to take? Of course, for me, that ended up being 4 years of wrestling with God over the question of should I enter seminary? Because we'll rewind back to my days of sitting in the pew and looking at Emily and thinking, oh, this is perfect. We just got to wait a few years, and then obviously it's going to be marriage. By the way, she's happily married right now. She's awesome. But back in those days, when I started getting just really amazed at what was happening at the altar, I remember getting this thought, and the thought was, what would I say about that gospel? I mean, not that I would ever preach the gospel. Obviously not. I misthought there. I'm sorry. Let's take that one back, God, because obviously I'm not called to be a priest. At 14, that thought first entered the mind. And then, you know how I love my sister because she's annoying and persistent and trying to get me to not be a wretched person? Well, I also had an annoying youth group, an annoying youth minister, who would very often call us, challenge us to discern what God's calling us to. Would say, be bold. Really, write him a blank check with your life. And let him reveal to you what he wants from you. And consistently, that annoying thought kept coming back hey, how about you be a priest? And I'd say, hey, how about not? Next. And it was about 4 years of this wrestling match of me being convinced that I knew better what would make me happy than God. But you know what? I don't think God's upset with me for how long the wrestling took. Because that was the time that it took for me to learn that this God that for the first part of my life was just a peripheral part of my life, it took some time for him to become the center of it and one that I can trust. Over the hours spent in adoration, over the days that I would go to Mass and receive my Lord, I built up a trust. I started to get to know him and myself better. And I got to know him as one who would rather die than see me anything less than fully and completely happy for all eternity. If it's a God for whom my happiness is more important than his life, then I think I could trust him. And so I started daydreaming about what's going to make me happiest 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And I started thinking about wife and kids. And I thought, oh my gosh, that would make me so happy. every single aspect of it. The fun ones and the disgusting ones, all of them. Even changing diapers, I was like, that's what dads do. I would love it. It'd be great. I was as naturally happy as is possible at the thought of that. And then I thought, all right, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, as a priest, what would that look like? And something remarkable happened. I was able to tap into a deeper joy than I believed I knew how to feel. I was able to not only be fully naturally happy, but I tapped into that supernatural happiness that comes from striking gold, from saying, oh, that's what you made me for. And the thought of like journeying with a parish, to be intimately involved in people's lives, to be a father to those who maybe didn't have a father, and because of that didn't know their father up in heaven. To be able in the course of one day to be with someone on the day that their first child was born. And then maybe going right from there to be with someone at the moment of their passing from this life to the next. And then to speed from there to prepare a couple for marriage. And then to go from there to see all my little kiddos preparing for First Communion. And then to go to bed thinking, all right, Lord, I didn't just sacrifice a family, I gained a family. A family that I could spend myself for totally, because I'm undivided. So it was that thought that made me realize this God who I came to meet through these friends, through this girl, through my sister, through my parents who built that foundation. This God who came to meet me in the Incarnation, in the Mass, in Adoration. This God was one that I can trust. And that He was not one that I was just supposed to meet and then say, yep, I met Him, cool, that was a great moment in my life, but that I was supposed to meet in order to follow. So this wouldn't just be this one spectacular moment where I gave my life to God and then, but the beginning of a spectacular adventure of following God for the rest of my life. And then exploring the great mystery that is God for all of eternity. Thank you very much. I think that's it.
I know there aren't any kneelers in here, but if you are able to, please kneel.
Such boundless grace.
celebrate has no claim on me. The King of glory, let's seal the promise. Your very body begins to breathe out of the silence. The roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah. Praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah. Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. God, you are my living hope. Salutoris Socia, Christiani Quandis Socium, Bella venunt Posilia, Darover Ferocilium,
Lord Jesus Christ, you gave us the Eucharist as the memorial of your suffering and death. May our worship of this sacrament of your body and blood help us to experience the salvation you won for us and the peace of the kingdom, where you live with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever.
Amen.
Blessed be God.
Blessed be God.
Blessed be his holy name.
Blessed be his holy name.
Blessed be Jesus Christ, true God.
Blessed be Jesus Christ, true God and true man.
Blessed be the name of Jesus.
Blessed be the name of Jesus.
Blessed be his most sacred heart.
Blessed be his most sacred heart.
Blessed be his most precious blood.
Blessed be his most precious blood.
Blessed be Jesus in the most holy sacrament of the altar.
Blessed be Jesus in the most holy sacrament of the altar.
Blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete.
Blessed be the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete.
Blessed be the great Mother of God, Mary, most holy.
Blessed be the great Mother of God, Mary, most holy.
Blessed be her holy and immaculate conception.
Blessed be her holy and immaculate conception.
Blessed be her glorious assumption.
Blessed be her glorious assumption.
Blessed be the name of Mary, Virgin and Mother.
Blessed be the name of Mary, Virgin and Mother.
Blessed be Saint Joseph, her most chaste spouse.
Blessed be Saint Joseph, her most chaste spouse.
Blessed be God and his angels.
Blessed be God and his angels and his saints.
His name is Jesus, precious Jesus, Lord Almighty, King of my